Thank you so much, Josh. Extra special gift for me to have you holding our space today. And of course, Adi holding our technical space, and really to all of you for showing up for yourselves, for each other, and for me. So thank you. So I want to just invite everyone to begin by kind of moving around in your seat a little bit, making any adjustments, and assess what's showing up in your body today in this moment. And when you feel like you've moved around enough to make space for your breath, to find a good seat, you can keep your eyes open or closed or anywhere in between, and just begin to take some deep breaths. Relax your hands on your thighs in a way that feels good and right in your body. Just allowing the breath to flow naturally through you. Let these breaths be your arrival, the first steps into your practice, your first steps of you towards you. Each inhale is a step closer. Every time we sit is an invitation to feel at home in our bodies in this moment. Notice if you're carrying something with you which might interrupt the flow that's taking you outside of yourself. And turn to your breath and see if you can allow your breath to sort of remove whatever obstacle may be showing up so that we can come home again. And into our hands and hearts, we place gratitude for this practice, for this opportunity to come together, to sit, to breathe, to be, to heal, to return to ourselves. Not as an act of selfishness or ego, but a way of coming home to our divine selves, our souls, our wholeness, in service of our higher purpose and our higher presence. When you're ready, feel free to open your eyes if you've closed them. And I want to share a teaching from this week's Parsha. So we're still in the beginning of Bereshit, of Genesis, chock full with action. This week is Parashat Vayera. We most recently revisited the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, on Rosh Hashanah. But I want to bring our attention today to sort of the opening scene of Vayera. We are presented with this incredibly intimate, you might say, moment in which God reveals God's self to Avraham as he sits at the entrance of his tent on a hot and sunny day. He's described as being Yoshev Petach HaOhel, sitting at the entrance of his tent. And yet just one verse after God appears to Avraham, God appears to perhaps lose the competition for Avraham's attention to a new and different set of guests. So we're going to take a look at the text. Dee, if you will kindly bring that up. Great. So I'm just going to read through these first couple of verses, and then we'll bring our attention to the end here with a sort of ambiguity in the text, which I think can be instructive for us in our practice. So God appeared to Avraham by the oaks of Mamre as he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. And Avraham lifted up his eyes and saw that, behold, there were 3 men standing before him. When he saw them, he ran to greet them from the entrance to the tent and bowed low to the ground. He said, my masters, or master, Adonai, if I have now found favor in your eyes, do not leave from before your servant. Okay, so we're going to focus in on this word Adonai, which could potentially reference here Adonai, my God, or Adonai, my Lord, one of these guests. So Rashi, on the third verse of this story, points out that it's not quite clear who Avraham is addressing when it appears that he turns his attention from God, who appears to him in some way, to the other guests. Is it God? Is it the visitors? Some combination. And so Rashi says, and Adi, you can just scroll down a little bit. He said, my master, Adonai, if I have now found favor. This is Avraham speaking to the greatest of the visitors. And he called them all Adonim, masters. And to the greatest, he said, do not leave. And when he doesn't leave, his companions will remain with him. And in this way, the term Adonai refers to something ordinary. But Rashi quotes another opinion here from the Talmud, and that is that Adonai refers to something holy. And Avraham is saying to the Holy Blessed One, wait, you God, wait, while I run to welcome the other guests. Great. So Adi, you can take away the text. So according to the first, and perhaps the more straightforward opinion suggested by Rashi, when it appears that Avraham is speaking to his new guests and ignoring God, that is exactly what is happening. Avraham sort of abandons God, so to speak, in favor of the newcomers. However, according to the second opinion that Rashi offers, Avraham does not turn his attention to his new guests without taking God's presence into account. So he first asks God's forbearance in order to sort of take a temporary leave and feed his visitors. So when Avraham addresses a figure as Adonai, it could refer to his divine guest or to his angelic visitors who have come in human guise. And I want to suggest for the purposes of our practice that this ambiguity may be deliberately here. And it can teach us that the distinction between honoring God, the divine Adonai, and honoring one another, other Adonim, that distinction may not be so necessary, helpful, or accurate. That as Avraham is taking care of the guests, the physical guests in his midst, he is also showing honor to God. When Avraham is greeting his visitors, he's also speaking to God in a way, simultaneously and without distinction. And again, I want to use this as a framework for our practice, because in many ways, when we sit here at the entrance to our tents, it can be likened to sort of sitting at the entrance to our hearts and our minds, watching what's happening, watching the guests come in, leave, moving from thought to thought, feeling to feeling, sensation to sensation, breath to breath. How often in our practice, I can easily say this from my own experience, do I engage in the practice of sitting, and I will have a moment of perhaps what I would call a divine encounter, and no sooner am I thinking about a pickup for carpool or, what's for dinner or any other number of mundane considerations. So this is what it is to sit. And if you're like me, you might feel frustrated. I can remember one of my first really kind of transcendent experiences sitting in meditation on an IJS retreat. And when I sort of moved out of that acute experience, I just felt so sad and disappointed as I became concerned with just the stuff of what it is to sit here in my body. So that can happen too. But I want to invite us in our practice today to imagine what it might feel like if all guests were welcome, and that we need not sort of worry or concern ourselves with Adonai, the divine guest, or some other manifestations of the divine which come our way. And we need not make that even so clear. And I want to finish sort of our review of a text to bring us into practice. So Dee, if you'll bring the text back up, this is a text from Rav Kook, and he really makes this point so beautifully. So he writes, and similarly with everything that he does, in truth, there is nothing in this world which is not for God's honor. Therefore, everything he does could be God's word, command, and desire. So he should seek God's name in them. And when he strives with all of his intellect and all of his power to do what he does with the goal of wholeness, in all aspects of wholeness, he will find that he knows God in all of the ways. So again, according to Rav Kook, who's speaking here about mitzvot, it's not only about, it's not so important even that we distinguish between God. It's about really all of us, all the parts of us coming to experience the divine that is embedded within them, and vice versa. All right. Thank you, Adi. You can remove the text. So let's turn to practice. Again, the invitation as we sit is to position ourselves at the opening of our own tents, our hearts and our minds, and breathe together. And to use the breath to welcome whatever guests pass through. To relax the impulse to categorize holy, mundane, sacred, profane, and just be with whatever is passing through. Knowing that each breath could be an angel of God. So we settle into our seats and get as comfortable as possible in your body in this moment. You can keep your eyes open or closed or anywhere in between. And just allow your breath to flow softly. I invite you to begin by welcoming in each inhalation. Bring your awareness to the connection to the earth beneath you, where your feet or your back body meets the ground, the cushion, your chair. Sensing in a felt way that whatever comes between you and the earth is a channel for transmission. We are anchored and we are held. And as your breath finds a steady flow, simply notice what you notice. Can you welcome in whatever comes your way as an angel? So we'll sit for the next 7 or 8 minutes, and I'll bring us back together with the sound of my voice. into our hands and hearts. Again, we place gratitude for this practice, for this holy chevra gathered here now, and for those who will practice with us later. We give thanks for the chance to sit at our own petach ha'ohel, our own opening of our tent. That is our hearts and our minds. May our openness to the guests that we have welcomed in our practice help us to welcome the other kinds of guests that will come about in our lives, off the chair, off the cushion. May we experience those guests not as intruders, but as angels, there to teach us and guide us as we take our next breaths and our next steps. I invite you to take a couple of soft, gentle breaths as we conclude our practice. And I want to close with a poem. It is an often quoted poem, and I think for good reason. The Guest House. This, being human, is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Thank you so much for your presence and participation. I turn it back to Josh.
Thanks so much, Jenny. I invite you to stick around for a few minutes after 1 o'clock to offer any reflections or ask questions. Before we do that, we're going to just now take a moment for those who are saying Kaddish to do so. If you'd like to join me, and if you'd like to in the chat, just share the name if you'd like to of a person, if there's anyone in particular that you're saying Kaddish for. Okay, and you're welcome to unmute for this portion as well. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbi.
Amen.
Yalma v'yifrach shemukei v'yamlich v'chukei chayechon v'yamechon v'chayei
ויומכון וחי לכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. יש מרבה ברך ברך וישתבח ויתרומם ויתהלל ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי בקדושה ויקרא כל ברכתה ושיר את חסדתה ונחמתה ועמלה ועלמה ואמונה אמן. ישלמה רבה מן שמיים כל ישראל אמן. ושלום אמור כל ישראל
Amen.
All right, Jenny, again, thank you so much. I encourage you to stick around if you can, if you want to engage in any questions or offer reflections. And if you are leaving us, want to wish you Tzeitchem L'Shalom, invite you back tomorrow or whenever you can make it at 12:30 Eastern. Jenny, thank you so much for that beautiful framing of our Parsha this week and a way of thinking about these guests. And I wonder, I found myself last week, I was teaching a group and I found myself teaching a piece of Art Green about non-dual theology. Sorry, the cat needs to come up. about non-dual theology, about right, as our teacher Nancy Flam likes to say, God is not a being, God is being, right? And I wonder to what extent that orientation, I found as I was listening to your teaching here, the question of who is the Elohim, right? Coming up. And I wonder if that opens anything for you and by way of like reflection of how we talk about God and how we experience God, and and maybe we overdo it sometimes in the way that we do that. I wonder. Anyway, I would just love to hear what you think, and I also want to invite, if you had reflections or questions, to please share them in the chat.
Yeah, no, I so appreciate your reflection. I mean, I think one of the ways in which Hasidic thinking and teaching has opened me up in so many ways is like, I have such a natural urge to kind of label things, this, not that, and or good and bad, with a kind of valences of whether something is pleasing or not pleasing. I want that guest, not that guest. But to open it up and just kind of continue to remember, again, in the fullness of my Jewish practice, of which meditation is a part, like that I'm here to practice my wholeness. I'm here to use this physical experience, not only this specific practice of meditation, but my physical experience of being on this planet for this time, to also experience everything on the inside and that which is around me in spirit, and to see if I can welcome it all in some way, and see the divine possibility. I mean, I was even like noticing as I was sitting today, like I have different ways that I like to hold my hands. I don't spend so much time thinking about it, but I just noticed that the way I was holding my hands, it was like I was holding my other hand. And my husband is visiting his parents, so we aren't apart pretty much ever anymore. And I know that when he's away, I feel a little unstable. I'm missing him. And I was kind of holding my own hand. This was all happening kind of unintentionally, but as I was noticing, there too, for me, felt like this divine impulse to be my own beloved in this moment.
There's a couple of there's a couple of questions. Just responding, Deborah. The link for the we can put the link again, but the link is shared in the chat if you want to see the text. There's some questions here about how do you work with people who are a trigger for negative emotions? Is there a specific practice you can recommend based on this teaching about how to maintain compassion?
Yeah, I mean, I think this practice for me is a wonderful way of just noticing. So of just allowing, like, so first of all, even noticing, I grew up in a home where like, we like everything to be good and happy and okay. So I have a natural resistance to even being able to notice that something is very unpleasurable, is, bothersome to me, is upsetting to me. So just being able to know that can be a relief. That can be its own act of self-compassion. I don't think we have to like love all people or feeling sensations. Like we can just allow them to be, and hold ourselves a little bit as we move through that inevitability.
Well, and then that leads into the next question here. Might you speak a bit about how even the dark thoughts or unwelcome thoughts might be viewed as a guest or guide from beyond?
Again, one of the fruits of this practice is just knowing that these unwelcome guests will come, but they will also go. And so I'm practicing regularly, I have 2 kids right now who are away doing, special things away from home in a long-term kind of way for the first time, more than summer camp. And so I don't have that pulse on them in the same kind of way. And so if I just get I think Sylvia Boorstein once said this, like, she's always like one word away from feeling very bad. It's like ma, like that word. And so if I get one of those sorts of messages from my kids, I can be left feeling worried and unsettled. And then I hear from them again, and I hear a smile. And just a reminder outside of my meditation practice that the worry will come and it will go, and they will find their way and I will find my way. And just to remember that nobody comes to stay forever. So it's one way to think about some of those more unpleasant, unwelcome guests.
Yeah. Jody shared the welcoming prayer, which is beautiful. There's a question here also. Sorry, long comment. It's a question: did Avraham circumcise himself at that time? I'm not sure that's exactly what yeah. So yes, nobody else did it for him as far as the text is concerned. I'm pretty sure that's the answer to that question. So there's a reminiscence here about Colin Powell as well. I think Jenny also, one of the related pieces here is also just this question of self-compassion, right? And that the tendency for us to judge ourselves for how we might feel about certain guests, whether they're emotions or other sorts of triggers, right? So it's like the secondary piece of you wind up in the downward spiral, and how this practice can help us. It both requires and it also calls us back to, right, self-compassion, and which is tricky when you're in the moment, right? When you're in that moment trying to disrupt that pattern. And can you want to speak to that for a second? Like if you found ways that, when you just sort of talked about, this isn't going to stay forever, and that's helpful. But there's also the secondary piece of, when you've gotten into, I'm not doing it right, or I'm feeling bad that I'm feeling bad. Right. And then it can just wind up on this downward trajectory. So there's got to be, there's a moment where can I step out of that and help myself kind of buoy back to the surface?
Yeah. That feels very familiar. I think the breath can be part of that recentering when I'm feeling stuck, or when I feel that the unwelcome guest has overstayed her welcome. The breath can be an invitation, even to invite. Sometimes allow is sort of what the calling of the moment is, but sometimes the moment calls for an active invitation for the unwelcome guest to leave. I know, like, if I can become aware, if there's enough space inside of my mind where I can watch shame take hold, or something else, which is like a major disruptor to my ability to be present and learn and connect, then I may need to use my breath to invite that to leave. And then there are other times where what feels more called for is just sort of a faithfulness. Again, that this moment won't last forever, that I won't get stuck here, and that I can just be with what's showing up.
Okay. Last question. Where are you, and do you have a website? I'll let you answer that.
That's very sweet. I am in Raleigh, North Carolina, And no, I don't have a website, although I do work at a synagogue. Beth Meyer Synagogue is my beloved community. I know there are a bunch of folks from Beth Meyer joining us today. I'm so grateful you're here. And yeah, there's always stuff coming up, but I do put things on Facebook, and I'm committed to learning how to use Instagram this year. So that's a place where hopefully you can find me as well. Thank you.
All right, and you're a regular here. So thank you so much, Jenny. It's great to see you. Thank you everybody for joining us, and we will be back tomorrow at the regular time.